Okay, so now we're back with the medial wall of the middle ear space. So what was the problem that you had with that, or was there a
Oh, I couldn't remember where the pars superior was located.
Ah, okay. Now that was asking, that was actually specifying the eardrum, correct? Of the TM.
Yeah, the medial wall of the middle ear space
Right.
in the
So when you think of the middle ear space as this box, you've got the medial wall, which is in the toward the inside. So the eardrum would be on which surface?
the lateral.
Lateral. So on that question, anything that mentioned eardrum couldn't be medial, right? So when you're thinking medial, again, think toward the inside. Lateral would be toward the outside. Is that
Yeah,
what
that's
the
correct.
concern was? And again, the reason I'm asking about that is because it turns out that the middle ear space, which is very prone to infection, has a lot of very important structures in it and running through it. Nerves, blood vessels, all kinds of things. And so that's why the health of the middle ear is so important, and that's why your understanding of what keeps it healthy, that being normal eustachian tube function, is also important.
Okay.
Okay?
Can you still show where the pars superior is?
The of the eardrum,
Yeah.
that would be this. Well, what do you think it'd be? It'd be this part up here. It's called the pars flaccida,
Okay.
typically, right? But it's the superior portion,
Okay.
and the pars tensa would be in the inferior portion. Any other middle ear related questions while we're kind of in here right now while I've got this PowerPoint up? No? Yes? No? Okay. Any others then?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Could you review what happens when the ossicular chain stiffens?
As during the acoustic reflex.
Correct.
So the question was, can you review what happens uh, when the acoustic reflex is stimulated and the ossicular chain is stiffened by that muscle contraction? That's the question. So what will happen is, as that system is stiffened, and the reason it gets stiffened is because you have these muscles pulling on those ossicles basically in opposite directions, tightening them up. So if the system gets stiffer, its resonance frequency will change, correct? Will it get higher or lower? Higher. So imagine the energy then being passed by that middle ear system being shifted to higher frequencies. It means that the low frequency energy that was in the atmosphere will not be allowed to pass through that middle ear system. High frequency energy will also be attenuated a bit, but not nearly as much as low frequency energy. Okay? So when we have an object that is made stiffer somehow, energy gets damped more effectively. Think of a bell that you put your hand on and stop it from, you're damping that bell's vibration when you do that, right? Same thing with a guitar string or a piano string or anything, right? And when an object gets stiffer, that means that it has more what? Inertia or more restoring force?
Restoring force.
Restoring force, which means that it's going to be driven back to its resting position quicker. So its vibration will be at a faster rate and it will be more damped. In other words, it won't vibrate for as much time as it would have before it got stiffened. So that's what the acoustic reflex accomplishes with respect to damping of sound and also kind of filtering out of low frequency energy. The middle ear becomes much more of a low reject, if you will. It does a much better job of filtering out low frequency energy when the acoustic reflex is active versus when it's not active. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're not convincing me.
um, I'm just trying to think of it in context of what I've learned through the lecture, and
Okay.
you mentioned all of that in the
Right.
lecture about the process of it.
Okay. You know what the acoustic reflex really protects us from? Because, I mean, it's been on the planet a lot longer than guns, right? It's been on the planet a lot longer than airplanes. It's been on the planet longer than any loud sound except for maybe volcanoes. Okay? So it's obviously not protecting us from fireworks. What's it protecting us from? Really the sound of our own voice. When you're about to vocalize, your acoustic reflex contracts moments before you do, milliseconds before you do. When you're about to eat something, that happens also. You can grab a chair from down the hall if you want to. You're okay. You're fine. In that conference room just past the elevator, there's a bunch of chairs in there. Just grab one and wheel it down. Absolutely. We'll get a good price for it. Okay? That's all right. Take your time. Um, so what was I saying?
That the acoustic reflex protects you from
Right. From your own voice and from the sound of your own chewing. That's what it's there for, right? And the sound of our own voice, what's your fundamental? What's your FO? SLP wannabes, what's your FO? Mine's about 100 hertz, maybe a little lower. What's y'all's? 225, 230, somewhere in there. That's a low pitch sound, right? That's where the bulk, the most of the energy of your vocal output, on average will be. So the acoustic reflex protects you from that low frequency energy associated with your own phonation. There's chairs down the hall if you want to grab one in that conference room. You're fine? Okay. And here's this if anybody needs to swing around here to look at it. I'm sorry that I can't just put it right there. So again, that's what it's for. That's what it's for.
So, I mean, it sounds like then it stiffens, it doesn't respond then to the input, so then it's protecting the inner ear.
Right. So the question was, it stiffens and it's protective in nature. That's true. So if a loud sound comes from outside, it will also contract, but
Right.
milliseconds, like a couple dozen milliseconds after the sound, right? So there is anticipatory acoustic reflex activity when your brain knows you're about to talk or about to chew something. But when it's provoked by an external sound, that sound can still be damaging because it was on for, again, a couple dozen milliseconds before the acoustic reflex even contracted. So it's not perfect. And it doesn't keep up well with powerful external sounds. That's not what it was made for. Yeah. Any other middle ear stuff while we're in here? There's some whispering going on in the background.
I have a question.
Yes.
The study guide for the hearing section that you had put up at the beginning of the semester,
Uh-huh.
I had went through it for a midterm, and I have a couple of questions, just clarification
Okay.
questions.
Clarification questions being asked now regarding the study guide that was posted on D2L.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On this number 2, the anatomy of the outer ear.
Yeah.
On A, you have tissue types,
Mm-hmm.
and I just want to clarify: are we talking about?
We're talking about cartilage versus bony,
Okay.
and we're talking about outer ear epithelium versus middle ear epithelium.
So, for example, the external auditory meatus,
Mm-hmm.
lateral 1/3 is the cartilage.
Cartilaginous,
Then,
correct.
the medial 2/3 would be the bone.
Bony or osseous. Mm-hmm.
And then, do we need to know the pars tensa, the tissue layers of those,
Mm-hmm.
and also?
So the question, she's getting clarification on the cartilaginous portion of the outer ear filling the lateral 1/3, the osseous portion of the outer ear filling the medial 2/3. And then the question was, do we need to also know about the different tissue layers of the eardrum? And the answer to that is yes. So the effective area of the eardrum is that part that has those fibers in between the two layers of epithelium, the so-called pars tensa, that'd be the inferior part. And then there's the pars flaccida, which is on the superior aspect of the drum, and it lacks those fibrous tissues in between the two layers of epithelium, so it's a lot floppier. And it does not contribute to the effective area of the eardrum. So those mechanical advantages that I talked about, like the surface area advantage, for example, that's just the pars tensa and its ratio in terms of square footage, in terms of area, to the stapes footplate. And the bigger the difference in relative surface areas, the more amplification, the more mechanical amplification there will be. And I probably used an example in the lectures regarding doing something like walking in high heels on grass, right? So if you're walking in tennis shoes on grass, your body stays above the grass, correct? When you put all of your weight on a very small surface area instead of the entire surface area of your foot, if you put it all on that little surface area with a heel, what happens to that heel? It goes right through the ground, right? Because your weight, your mass, focused on a very small surface area actually allows you to do a lot of mechanical work, right? You can punch holes in the lawn if you want to, right? But when your weight or your mass is spread out across a larger surface area, you don't sink as far, you don't do as much work, so to speak. So the Stapes foot plate would be your high heel, and the surface of your eardrum would be actually the surface of your foot, probably. So that foot to heel ratio is much bigger when you're wearing high heels versus when you're wearing flats or tennis shoes. Was that the correct use of the word flats? Oh, very good. Okay. Yes. Yeah, you're good. You're good. That's why we're here.
Number 4, the anatomy of the middle ear.
Yeah.
The important structures that surround the middle ear space. Are we talking about the muscles?
Okay, so the question was on that study guide number 4, asking about the important structures in and around the middle ear. So that's kind of that box we were talking about earlier. That would be this. So you want to know what's on the different walls of the box.
Okay, so the medial wall.
Yeah, you'd want to know that there's a nerve that courses right through that medial wall. You'd want to know the cochlea is just on the other side. You'd want to know the eardrum is on the lateral surface. You'd want to know that the tegmen tympani and the meninges are just superior to that surface. You'd want to know the eustachian tube empties out from the inferior aspect of the middle ear space. Kind of all those things. And then in terms of the stuff that's around it, you want to keep in mind things like the carotid artery, the jugular vein. Again, the seventh nerve runs right around there, because these are important structures. And if they get somehow infected through the spread of infection from the middle ear space, then you really have problems. Tainted blood making it into the jugular vein, for example, is something that can happen when the middle ear space has been compromised for a while. So those are the items that you want to be thinking about there, just sort of the geography of the middle ear and what else is in the vicinity. I'm going to guess you had to do the same kind of thing when you were talking about, I don't know, the velum. You wanted to know what it was attached to. You wanted to know what muscles were in the area. You wanted to know what it did when it functioned properly and what it didn't do when it didn't function properly. Substitute eustachian tube for velum and look at the middle ear the same way. Any other middle ear stuff? I've got the physics of sound PowerPoint called up. I've got the outer ear one. I've got inner ear anatomy. I've got inner ear physiology all ready to go if you have questions from any of those areas.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, we're back. Yes.
The inner ear mechanical response.
The inner ear mechanical response.
Whenever, so the high frequency sounds are at the base, and then the low frequency
High
sounds.
frequency sounds are processed at the base, low frequency sounds at the apex, correct?
You were giving an example in one of the lectures, and you said, for instance, if say it's 5 hertz,
Right.
and you said um, because the low frequency, it's not going to bulge or cross over the vascular
Right. So
membrane.
the question is specifically about the example I provided right at the start of looking at the tonotopic organization in the cochlea, where I suggested an extremely low frequency sound would be inaudible, would be undetectable, because the fluid displacement actually just goes right around the helicotrema and down the scala tympani and then bulges out the round window without ever displacing the structures in the middle ear. If the structures in the middle ear, in the not the middle ear, the scala media, sorry. If the structures in the scala media are not displaced, if those hair cells are not sheared, then it's as though there's no receiver of the sound because there will be no transduction from the mechanical waveform caused by the fluid motion into the nerve energy, the electrical energy that we associate with action potentials and nerve impulses, right? So if there's no transduction, there's no sound.
You could say high frequency then is kind of proportional relational to high displacement or greater displacement.
No, you want to say that just like with all, so the question was, you want to say high frequency is consistent with high displacement? No. High frequency is consistent with just processing at the base.
Okay, it doesn't really relate to the displacement.
Well, it does. What's the relation between frequency and displacement?
They're inverse,
They
right?
are inversely related. Very good. So actually the basilar membrane displacements at the base are smaller than they are at the apex given equal amounts of energy. And you have this so-called cochlear amplifier that we're not really going to talk much about that basically works to amplify the traveling wave mechanical response primarily at the base of the cochlea in the high frequency region to overcome that physical reality
Okay.
of an inverse relation between displacement and frequency. Okay? But when you're talking about the scala media not being displaced when you stimulate with a very low frequency sound, I can give you another example of that. If you've ever been at the bottom of a swimming pool messing around with the grill, the thing that's down there, like when you were a kid and you would dive down to the bottom. Remember how much your ears hurt when you did that? So that's the pressure from the water pushing on your eardrums. Now, if that water is pushing on your eardrums, then it's also pushing on the stapes footplate, and it's driving that stapes footplate into your inner ear. How come that doesn't produce a deafening sound? Right? It hurts. If it's pushing your eardrum so much that your eardrum hurts, why isn't it making a deafening sound? Because it's happening at such a low frequency, all it's doing is pushing the fluid around the helicotrema. So as your stapes is being driven into your cochlea, your round window is being bulged out. When a scuba diver gets in trouble, gets the bends, but gets in trouble because of the pressure, very often they blow out their round window. So their stapes is getting pushed into their cochlea with so much force that the round window starts to leak fluid. And then you've got a very dizzy scuba diver who can't tell up from down way underwater. Beautiful. Right. So again, why doesn't that produce a deafening sound? Well, because all it's doing is pushing the fluids around without displacing the scala media. Okay? So for there to be a sound, it's got to be in that frequency range where the scala media can actually be displaced. And that's from about 20 to 20,000 hertz. All right. So the next question is going to have to do with this diagram of the inner ear, and the question was, oh, you wanted me to just review it? You know, like just say what everything is?
Yes.
Okay. Tectorial membrane is over here. That's this thing.
Oh.
Oh.
What is the middle white part?
This here?
No,
Oh,
above
right
that.
there?
Yes.
You know, it's evidence of a little shrinkage, I think. So when they fix this preparation of the inner ear, I think the tectorial membrane, which is this very gelatinous liquid-like thing, just kind of like a sponge, kind of got smaller. This is just empty space. But normally this would be down closer, so these stereocilia would be embedded in it. But when they killed the critter and cut open its head and ripped its temporal bone out and did this section, you know, things got a little damaged.
Sure.
Yeah. And so the tectorial membrane got a little thinner, I think, than it would normally be. This is kind of what it more normally would look like. See how it's kind of laying right there?
Yeah.
Right? Another way to look at it would be more like this. Okay?
Okay, yeah, that's helpful.
All right. And then was there anything else about that particular image?
No, I just thought that the outer hair cells were actually already stuck in the tectorial membrane, and that wasn't actually a space, that was a membrane in and of itself.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you wanted this right here, this fluid, to be the tectorial membrane.
Yes.
I see. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I can see what you're saying because it is true that under normal conditions, this would be much closer to those.
So, thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, sorry about that. That's a good point. I'll use a different diagram next year. Yeah. But now, just in fairness, most people were okay with tectorial membrane. They had a harder time knowing which way the medialis was and which way the stria was. Now, how do you tell which direction is which? Yeah, where are the outer hair cells? That's the outside. That's toward the stria. Right? Always, 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 always. It has to be that way. Right? Okay, good question though. Any, since we got the cochlea right here, any other inner ear questions? Okay.
Is there a difference between the external auditory canal and the external acoustic tail?
Is there any difference between the external auditory canal and the external auditory meatus? No, they're the same thing. But there is an internal auditory meatus, and that is different. That's what carries the auditory nerve from the cochlea. It's a bony canal, carries it to the brainstem. Yeah. So if you want to use meatus, which is fine, just make sure you distinguish between internal and external.
On quiz 1, it counted off if you put external acoustic.
No, I gave credit for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I went back in and regraded all those, and yeah. Everybody's got it? Great. Thank you.
I just have a question. Are we going to have 75 minutes left?
Question is, are we going to have 75 minutes? I think I changed it to 90 with an extra 5. The test has 30 multiple choice questions and 3 fill in the blanks, and the fill in the blanks have 2 of them have 6 blanks and 1 of them has 8 blanks, I think. So it's a total of 100 points. What I did was I moved, in the past I've had the fill-ins all the way at the end, and people have had a hard time finishing because they were pretty wiped out by the time they got there, I guess, and they just had a hard time with the fill-ins. And since there's a lot of points there, you don't want to lose all those. So I moved those up so that they're kind of interspersed throughout. There's still 30 multiple choice questions. So you'll have 30 multiple choice, 3 fill-ins, and 90 minutes plus a 5-minute grace period to do it in. And it's opening tonight at 5, and tomorrow night at 5, and staying open till Friday night at 5. I thought that would be most reasonable since we were going to be doing this, and this would give everybody a chance to kind of catch up a little bit if they felt they needed to.
Is our test, is it going to be to where you can't go back to the pages?
Is the test going to be to where you can't go back to any of the other pages? Yes, it is. I don't know how else to do it. I think when you write the test in that,
I
I
know that
think
I
you have
have
to.
one of the, in 4000,
Uh-huh.
she does it to where we have to do it in lockdown browser.
We're not using the lockdown browser. No. Um, so yeah, if you want to have your phone on and a second computer on and, you know, some movie about the inner ear and a record of Beethoven all going at the same time, go dog, go. I mean, it's that, nothing I can do about that, right? My bet is that if you look stuff up online while you're taking the test and you ace the test and you get into grad school, that's when you'll find out you didn't really know the stuff, and you'd want to find it out sooner than that, I think. The last thing you want to do is get into grad school and have a hard time because you didn't really learn stuff when you were an undergrad, right? I mean, come on. Believe me, getting into grad school, that's the easy part. That's the easy part.
But it's not easy.
I understand it's not easy. I understand it's stressful. But that's the easy part. Because when you get in, they've called your bluff. Now you got to do the work, right? So could be worse. You could be, trying to be a neurosurgeon or something like that. I don't know.
I
Yeah.
just think it's just scary taking the next step.
The comment was it's scary taking the next step, and I would say to that, welcome to being a grown-up. Welcome to being a grown-up. Hopefully you were prepped well for it, and if not, it doesn't matter. You're still a grown-up, right? It doesn't matter if your parents were, Madame Curie and her husband or whoever else. I mean, it's ultimately it's up to you, and that's why I think it's crucial for you all to realize as undergraduate students that the sooner that you take ownership over this material, if you want to continue. I mean, if you don't want to continue, it's a different story, right? Then it's just a kind of interesting class, and however you do is however you do, right? But if you do want to take that next step, then the sooner you own this material, the better your life will be later. And you should look at this as the opportunity to make your life better later, because that's why you're thinking about grad school in the first place, right? So, and that's good, but it's not for everyone, right? And like I said, the easy part is getting in. That's the way it should be anyway. So, and that's true, sort of, and sort of not true, because I know once students get in, they actually enjoy it. And it's hard, and you're broke, and you're working all the time, but you're building something for yourself and your family, and that's a good feeling, and that helps. So you don't really see that when you're applying. No.
You can see the end.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. I understand. Pause.
Not yet.
No, yeah, okay. You got one? Good. Good, okay.
I think that maybe I'm either overthinking it.
I think that maybe I'm either overthinking it or,
I don't
and
know.
here she comes. Hold on. So now we're back in the box for the middle ear, right? Okay, hang on. Let me get there.
I'm gonna make sure my terms are right.
Okay.
This, where the promontory is.
Yeah, the promontory of the cochlea.
Medial.
That's the medial wall, correct?
This, where the eustachian tube is going out, is the anterior.
So that's a good question. This would be, I'm looking at this ear from this side. The eustachian tube goes from the ear kind of medially, right? Again, toward the center of the head. So this would probably be more posterior. But this is really kind of a weird diagram because this tube really doesn't come through the side of the wall so much as it does from the bottom. So be thinking of eustachian tube more as inferior. Right. And here's the diagram I would point you to there. See this one here? Right there's the eustachian tube coming right out sort of from the bottom. The eustachian tube is going to be able to drain fluid out of that middle ear space under some circumstances. And you can picture that much better here than you can here. Right? So be thinking of eustachian tube more as inferior. Now let's see if we look at this angle here. So it's kind of from the bottom and from the front. This would be the anterior side. So it'd be kind of anterior and inferior.
Okay.
Now that I'm looking at it from this angle here. Of course, on one side of the head, it's one way. It'll be going toward the left, and on the other side, it'll be going toward the right. But think of it more as inferior.
Inferior.
Mm-hmm.
And so this wall
Yeah.
right here
Uh-huh.
is going to be superior or posterior?
Superior is up here.
Okay, so that's the top one.
Right.
Okay.
Superior is going to be up here, and this would be posterior toward the back.
Posterior.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And really, obviously, the big ones are medial,
Right.
superior, and lateral.
Mm-hmm.
And what's lateral?
This side?
The drum, the eardrum,
Okay.
right? And then, you got some ossicles stuck through there as well. But the ossicles really occupy the space. They don't really, fit on any one of the walls, except maybe for the malleus, kind of on the surface of the eardrum on that lateral side.